on the right. Excellent. I love hearing myself back. I'm sort of so used to it at this stage. Just as a by the way, my wife used to work in RTE. She finished up there 20 years ago, but she used to work in RTE. She worked there for nearly 20 years. And so anytime I'm doing stuff like this, or I'm either on the radio or the television, she's always both my sort of advisor and critic. So if I pass her test, I'm flying as far as I'm concerned. So I'm quite used to sort of then she'd be sort of checking up on me afterwards. So, you know, I'm sort of used to hearing my own voice coming back at me as she's sort of running through things and telling me, yeah, that was good now. That's what you need to improve. So it's a bit like Dr. Heal Thyself. But anyway, coming back to this. So just first of all, what is the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities? So, and by the way, what's very important to point out is that it's not the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, it's on the rights of people with disabilities. And the reason for that is, and it comes back to something we'll come to later on, is that to actually see is that we're all people, we're all equal, and some of us have disabilities, but we're not defined by that. Whereas the other way of saying is you're a disabled person actually defines you as so that it's you that's the problem, rather than actually this way. And the convention, and indeed current think is what's called the social model, is that actually we're all people, all with their own particular pluses and minuses. The issue is with how society responds to them, as distinct from the issue being with us. And actually this is what informs all of this, both the convention and the work around it. So the purpose of the convention is just to ensure the inclusion of people with disabilities in our society. So the full inclusion, that people with disabilities are able to participate fully as equal citizens. It's about eliminating any discriminations against people with disabilities and to ensure they enjoy full equality under the law. And I suppose that to ensure that, then governments who sign up to this convention are committing themselves then to look at their policies, their practices, their laws, to address then, to make sure that people with disabilities are included and to eliminate discriminations. And they have to account every few years to the UN for how they're getting on. So they do up a report, and this year, Ireland is doing up such a report, and they go to a UN committee, it's usually in Geneva, where they report and say, this is how we're getting on in meeting our obligations under the convention. But it's also open, and then what happens is people who are on, there's a committee set up in the UN to review it. They then listen to what the government has to say. They also take on board input from organizations representing people with disabilities, and they review all of that testimony, and then they say, okay, they give Ireland then homework. So a series of recommendations, here are the things you need to do to get into line with the commitments that you've made. And Ireland actually only signed up to this particular convention in 2018. So this year, 2021, is the first year that Ireland is accounting for its implementation of the convention. So basically, it's sort of the convention sets out rights and principles, and Ireland has adopted them and says, yes, we've signed up to that. And this year they're having to account for how they're doing that. So one of the things I was explaining this earlier on, the thinking behind the convention does represent a big move away from the traditional thinking, which was known as the medical or the charity model, which was, as I said, the person with the disability was the problem. Now it's turning it on its head and saying, no, it's society that has the problem in how it responds to the needs and of the person with disabilities. Because actually, you know, to a greater or lesser degree, we all have some sort of disabilities. And like me, I'm now 60. You know, as you get older, you acquire certain disabilities in the sense of, I think of my mother. My mother's 85. My mother isn't very good at walking, finds it difficult to walk now. So, for example, around our way here, if there are, for instance, lots of, as there are, cars parked up on the footpath, it's a problem for her. If there aren't, for instance, you know, if there isn't a proper length, for instance, in a traffic light, so to allow her safely cross the road because she crosses slowly to get from her side to the other side so she can get to the bus stop. So, you know, that the buses, for example, are able to come down so that she can get on easily rather than having to step up. So, so that's a normal part of aging, that people encounter things, whether it's arthritis or whatever, people slow down. They're not as able-bodied as they once were. So, you know, we're beginning to respond to that. So that's why we have things like dished footpaths at pedestrian crossings or near bus stops. So, for example, that people who are pushing buggies or prams can easily get across the road, or likewise somebody maybe who's a wheelchair user. So we're now beginning to sort of respond and say, oh, you know, that so the environment can be a problem and an obstacle to our full participation in society. And so that's the sort of the thinking now, is to sort of look at and say, it's not the person that's the problem. It's how we respond to that person's needs is the problem. And so likewise then in relation to mental health difficulties, because mental health problems would be seen as part of the package of disabilities that come under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And so I suppose what they're doing too is sort of saying, look, that we need to look at, so coming back to the sort of barriers that we're sort of talking about in the context of mental health, by signing to the UN Convention, Ireland has committed to removing barriers in, you know, areas, for example, like health, education, employment, law, privacy, all of those sorts of areas. So Ireland has committed itself to doing that. Now, to be clear, in signing up to the convention, it's not practical that they're going to be able to change. You know, our state has been around, it'll be 100 years old next year, that we can sort of change the whole suite of policies, programs, laws, and whatever, and practices of public sector bodies and the state, like in one fell swoop. Obviously, this is something that's done over a period of time. But just to be clear, the state has committed itself to looking at the sort of barriers that are in place that prevent the full inclusion of people with mental health difficulties in our society. So that's whether in terms of being able to work, whether that's being able to participate in education, so the whole range of things, okay? And obviously accessing health services. accessing services, sorry, is obviously one of the key areas as well. So coming back to mental health reform, and obviously it's mental health reform that are hosting this particular event. And I suppose it's important to say the mental health reform is a coalition of organizations and bodies that are committed to reform of our mental health services so that they properly address the needs of people experiencing mental health problems. And not just ones who are currently, but of people who may experience mental health problems down the road. And so it involves 77 organizations and thousands of people who've signed up to support its work. So the focus is very much around services, also the law as well too, improving our legal framework around, but it's around services, practice, and the sort of supports that people with mental health difficulties need in order to fully participate in society. So mental health reform is actually one of the groups. Remember I said earlier on that, you know, so this year Ireland is reporting on what it has done to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So mental health reform is actually, it's involved along with a whole number of other groups in actually monitoring and how Ireland is doing on that convention, but is also inputting into the state's report, and will also be inputting as well too, along with others, into when the UN committee actually does get to oversee what Ireland is doing. So mental health reform is very, sorry, Claire, yeah.
Can I just say, just on that, just about us being involved with other groups. So we're a funded member of, they're a newly funded group. They're called the Disability Participation Consultation Network. So it's ourselves, As I Am, Inclusion Ireland, and the Disability Federation of Ireland. So that group has also submitted to the UNCRPD. And the link that I've placed in the chat function there, there's a video that explains the DPCN submission. We also have an easy to read guide on the UNCRPD, and then our submission as well, and an easy to read version of that. So just, there's a lot of information there on the work that we do that can kind of supplement everything that Pat's saying.
Exactly, thank you. And I suppose I'm just trying to sort of do a summary sort of thing, just to sort of an even easier sort of guide or whatever to all of this. So I suppose it's to give some context for them for the work we're going to be doing later on. So mental health reform has done a submission to the government in relation to the UN Convention, and it has highlighted 5 areas where improvement is needed in relation to the government's work on mental health. So the first area is about the financing of effective mental health services, and that's a major, major problem, because we've had, I don't know how many times, announcement of 30 million or blah, 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 and blah, 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 and then it ends up being rolled into next year and whatever. So there is a major problem in terms of investment into services, which is why I'm coming back to the conversations we had last week, which is why, major reason why services are so poor, is because the investment is not sufficient. And what tends to happen, unfortunately, is that other services get more priority. And part of the reason they get more priority is because there are more people actively talking about the problems they're experiencing with the services. And as a result, then mental health tends to get pushed further down the pile, unfortunately. Another area is that there have been constant delays in making sure that our laws in relation to mental health are compliant with basic human rights requirements. And that's something, again, too, that, you know, there are a number of pieces of legislation which government has committed to update or improve upon, and they still haven't happened. And so that's something that, so a lot of our legislation governing the mental health area are very out of date and are certainly not compliant with the requirements of human rights. So then, sorry, we'll go back to this one here. And then the another thing too is that obviously our population is growing. And certainly because it's growing, the needs, clearly more services will be required. But also too as well, I suppose we're becoming ever more aware of maybe where there have been gaps in the past in terms of services. So, you know, the demand for services greatly outstrips the services that are available. And so the state has not been properly planning and putting in place services to meet the needs of people. So that's another piece. So that's not just about money. It's a bigger issue than just money. It's about actually looking down the road 4 or 5 years. And so that's why we're firefighting all the time. We're firefighting and trying to play catch up because we're not properly planning. One particular area of focus was in relation to the prison system, because, and the evidence for this is overwhelming, is that the vast majority of people in the prison system have very significant mental health challenges. And a lot actually will present, in fact, with a number of mental health challenges. So could be, for instance, you know, mental health problems overlaying with addiction issues and whatever. So there's a lot of issues there. And just again, that the treatment in the prison system for people with mental health problems is not sufficient. So of course, part of the issue then is that those people end up then coming back through the prison doors again because they're not getting the care and the treatment they require. And that's a problem. And the final area then is how that our welfare system and, you know, the whole area of state supports actively disincentivizes people with mental health challenges from actually either, you know, going into full-time education or work. And in particular, the loss of the medical card is a major problem. And that a lot of people are making a choice, and a rational choice, to stay on welfare because they can retain their medical card rather than going into work or study for fear of full-time study for fear of losing their medical card. And so that's a disincentive to the inclusion, the proper inclusion of people with mental health problems in our society. Okay. So there are the issues that have been highlighted, 5 issues: lack of finances, delays. I mean, and the long delays, in one case, we're looking at 11 years in actually bringing a piece of law to making it compliant from a human rights perspective. Failure to properly plan, not properly addressing the mental health needs of people in the prison system, and also to the structural difficulties with our welfare system that really discourage people with mental health problems taking up full-time work or indeed full-time study. So where do you come in? And I suppose this is the purpose of what we're doing here is, well, firstly, I would suspect that the vast majority of our public representatives, your TDs, your senators, even your councillors, haven't got a clue what the UN CRPD is, right? So actually part of our job is to inform them, is to talk to them about it, but also talk to them about like what Ireland's responsibilities are. So we've signed up to this, and I'm sure they may have heard of it, but they would have a very vague notion. this is not, by the way, to criticize or to finger point, because the reality is our public reps are, dealing with a massive amount of stuff. So whether that's, dealing with stuff coming up locally, so whether that's helping people with local issues and local problems, they've also got national responsibilities in terms of, say, whatever portfolio they hold. So whether they're on the education committee or the health committee or whatever. So they very much look at, okay, well, they focus on those particular jobs. But one of the things is, because you're one of their local constituents, they will become interested in this if you talk to them about it. Why? Because you're a voter in their constituency. And so that actually matters. And I cannot overemphasize actually how much that matters. And here's why. Because I've been knocking on doors in elections for 42 years. My first one was in 1979. And I can safely tell you that the number of people who actually raise issues on the doorsteps is tiny. And anyone who's ever done it will tell you the same. The vast majority of people, they're very polite. So just the first thing said, most people are very polite. They'll just say, oh yes, oh, I haven't made up my mind, or I'll think about it, or I'll take the leaflet and I look at it, or yeah, I'll think about it, or whatever. And people are just polite, thanks very much, and off they go. So the number of people who actually raise something and say, listen, I want to talk to you about, they're like, they stand out. And likewise, coming back to sort of politicians, is the same. So actually, when somebody actually talks to them about an issue, they then take note. So actually, it does matter if you bring up and say, listen, I want to talk to you about the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and the implications of it. So what we want to talk about are mental health reforms, the 5 points, or the 5 points insofar as they're relevant to you. So it could be, for example, your experience in finding it difficult to access services because of either the lack of planning or the lack of funding. Maybe it's your problems, for example, the challenges you found in getting into the workplace or returning to work, or the challenges, maybe you've experienced a challenge, say, around the medical card. So whatever it is that's relevant to you, so you don't go in and talk about all the 5 points, but you can, go in, and this is what we're going to go through now, in developing some sort of messaging around that, is talk a bit about the convention. We've signed up to it, and we now have a responsibility to address it. And I want to talk about the fact that we haven't honored our responsibilities, how that impacts on me, and then what it is I need you to do. And so that really is a thing that we want to get into. So the conversations you have bring the UN CRPD from being a vague notion that they've heard about to being something real and tangible, and it relates to their constituent, and therefore it relates to them. And it is something, therefore, that they become invested in. So we talked about this earlier on, about relationships and even seeing people eye to eye, for example, on this, how when you get to know somebody, you then want to help them. And that applies as much to public reps. And I've seen that where people will be genuinely committed. So there is an issue I'm dealing with, for example, and I know that people have been, when they've heard testimony from people about challenges. So I talked about this last week, about I'm doing a lot of work around the issue of apartment defects. So about 100,000 apartments in the country are affected by fire defects. In other words, they're not properly protected from fires. Massive safety issue. And actually, when I know the difference it's made when politicians have actually spoken to people and they've heard their stories and the worries and the stresses and the strains around that, they become, okay, I want to do something about this. I want to help. And they very genuinely are trying to help. So don't ever underestimate the difference that your conversations can actually have, because it takes it from being something vague and theoretical and up there to being something concrete and real for them, and something that by and large they will want to do something about. And that's why we're having this training, and that's where we want you to come in. So out of this, we need you to start having those conversations with your elected representatives. And the next bit, we're going to talk about how to do that. And we're going to have a little then session about then messaging and what to say. Is that okay? So I'm going to end this particular session now, or not that session, but just that particular set of slides now. So let me just end on that one there. And I want to go into the next set, which is, so this is the piece here, yeah. Okay. So this is just about, when it says presentations, this is something that applies equally in any context. So there's a lot of rudimentary stuff here that applies to all sorts of different contexts. And when I'm saying about presenting, it's about presenting yourself and your experience to elected reps, but it can be applied in any particular context. So there's some basic sort of rudiments here that we're going to go through. So, okay. So first of all, again, just to repeat for any of there, if you want to, and fair play to Claire. Claire tweeted a nice screenshot of my good self, you know, sort of stroking my beard. So again, it's good if any of you are on Twitter. It is important to do this. So yes, it's great for mental health reform and me that we're referenced. That's not so much the point. Actually, part of this is putting sort of people on notice. I'm talking about people being politicians, because I've, you know, nearly 3,000 followers. Mental health reform has loads of followers. Lots of elected reps would follow both myself and mental health reform. So they'll see, oh, there's something going on. Better watch out for that, or eyes and ears open for that. But also as well, too, there are other people out there who are experiencing mental health challenges who they may think, oh, there's something going on. Could I be part of this? So it just broadens the conversation. So that's an important important part in all of this. So just to say that there's somebody not muted, or am I wrong? Maybe it's my...
No, I just muted them there. I think we're okay.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's great. You're ahead of the posse. Fair play to you, Claire. So there's just, anyway, the Twitter handles, my email address if you want to follow up with me, if you have any queries or whatever, and then my website and the website for mental health reform, again, for follow-up purposes. So, okay. So just a reminder, as I said, we'd do just some basics. So again, I've sort of said this already, but look, speaking to your public reps is a good opportunity to put mental health issues on the agenda, because I'd bet that the number of people experiencing mental health challenges who have knocked on the door or engaged with public reps is quite small. So actually they will take note, they will engage. And so it's just important, it is an opportunity to influence, not just them, but their party's policy, that of government, and indeed the wider body politic and our administration. And actually, they only know about a large part of the way that we work out where the gaps in our services and our practice and whatever is through the feedback that elected reps get. That actually is a key mechanism for improving services. And I know this from direct experience. I'll just give you one case in point. So 20 years ago, I did a major piece of study on the budgetary process. And I remember talking to a former minister for social welfare as it then was, who was looking at that stage in the process of changing the Back to Education scheme. So the Back to Education scheme is basically for people who've been on social welfare and want to get back into education, so to improve their skills and their ability to get into the workforce. And the minister and the department had a particular scheme, a particular way they wanted to change the scheme. But actually, one of that minister's colleagues came and said, listen, I just had somebody come to me in my clinic with a particular issue or problem about back to education. And actually, as a result of that, they changed the way in which they were going to change the scheme. Because of one clinic case to one colleague, which was fed up, and they realized, oh God, if we went down this route, that person will be excluded from the scheme, and that's not something we would like to do. So actually, the feedback from public representatives actually is key, and is a massive way in which our services, our policies, and our practices are actually shaped. So don't underestimate the importance of those engagements. So we talked before about a singular focus. So when we go in to talk about the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, don't end up in bringing up anything and everything and whatever, because the problem is the wider and the bigger the agenda becomes, the less the points you're making are going to stick. You need to keep it focused. So here's what Ireland signed up to, and we're going to come back to this in the messaging. So here's what the convention is. Here are the implications of it. Here's what you signed up to, and your government, and indeed our whole political system has signed up to. But here's where it's falling short, in my experience. And here's what I need you to do. So we need to keep it tight. So it's about, here's the problem and here's the solution. So here are the drawbacks, here are the failures, the gaps in terms of properly implementing the convention, and here's what I need you to do about it. So we need things to stand out. Problem is, the more, so this is my chance, I haven't spoken to them, so all of my problems, all of my issues are going to lay on their doorstep. Difficulty about that is then it just becomes a jumble. The tighter, the more focused your messaging is, the more likely it is it's going to stick, right? So we talked about this the last day. So we're going to come back to messaging later on. So we leave that for the moment. So storytelling, again, we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to storytelling in a piece. And remember, again, just remember about thinking about your audience. So this is that To Kill a, you've all heard of, most of you have heard of the book To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, and also a great movie. My mother's favorite actor, Gregory Peck. Every time, Gregory Peck, you know. And in fairness, he was a good-looking dude, all right, and very good-looking in that movie as the great Atticus Finch. Can anyone remember what his daughter's name was, both in the book and in the movie? Can anyone remember what the name was? Scout. Scout. Daughter's name is Scout. So anyway, so you need to think about, so you need to put yourself in their shoes. So they're busy. Do they already have a track record on mental health? So for instance, if they're on a committee or if they've made contributions about mental health, well, then you have a good starting point. You don't necessarily have to go back into ancient history. If you've spoken to them already, you don't have to start way back at the beginning again. You know, you start where you left off with them. You need to know about their geography. Well, look, do they know a bit about, so, you know, if you're talking about services, for example, in Kilkenny, and I'm thinking about, just Claire is based in Carlow, Kilkenny, but she's based in the Carlow end. Well, you know, how much they know about my area. So just, you need to do a little bit of research and work out a bit, okay, what's my link with them? Did we go to the same school? Do we know people in common? So it's always good to try and sort of do a little bit of homework and see what's the link between you and them. And tone and tenor, we're in the business of providing solutions. So yes, we're saying there's a problem, but we have solutions. So this isn't just a rant. This isn't just a give out. This is saying there is a problem, but we've also got solutions to it. Mental health reform does have a suite of things that it's been lobbying and campaigning for to improve mental health services. And so there are things that we're looking for. So it's not just about giving out. And yes, you can perfectly and rightly express hurt, annoyance, disappointment, but don't make them the target of it. Because they're not personally responsible for the fact that their services, they may have been campaigning on this too. So let's not be targeting them for the failures that you have experienced. We want to recruit them as an ally, as distinct from saying, it's your fault and what are you going to do about it? We're looking to bring them on board as allies. It's about forming relationships. So somebody's put something up in the chat function. Have I? Scout, fair play to you, Jane. Yeah, Scout. So, okay. So we want to come back to just talk about presenting your case, because that's what you're going to be doing. So talking to them a bit about the UN Convention and the implications of it for us here in Ireland and for mental health, what the problems are, and then what needs to be done to fix it. So, does anyone know who that woman is in the picture? Anyone know? So that's the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and that's her preparing. So somebody, VP, fair play to Kira, the Veep, as they call them now. That's right, there's a comedy series actually called The Veep. But anyway, so this is Kamala Harris preparing, and you see her there, she's going through her notes. So actually, anyone who's serious about their business, including, you know, the second most powerful person in the world, they prepare. And, you know, you look at somebody making a speech or doing stuff, it's actually like, if you take, for instance, I was watching, you know, sometimes you watch some of those comedy, say, panel shows, and, you know, there are ad libs coming in right, left, and center. That's all rehearsed. Your ability to actually to ad lib or to take the ball on the hop is much greater when you know what you're doing. So you're focused on your performance as distinct from coming in with a jumble of stuff. And then you come out, you have a big jumble, and then you go, oh, I forgot to say, and I didn't mention, and I meant to say. So the bigger the jumble, the bigger the mess that's up here, the more difficult it is to actually deliver your message. So preparation is key. Now, I'm not asking you to do, because if they're doing a debate, they would put in literally days and days and days of preparation for a debate, because these things are critical, for example, in an election campaign, as to whether you're successful or not. And they have millions of people looking at them, and they make a big difference. So you need to prepare. And so the preparation is you need to write down what are the points you're going to make. Now, in writing it down, I don't mean that you go in and you read a script, because that's weird. If you're sort of going in to meet somebody and you're talking to them face to face, or even over Zoom or having a phone call. Because if you're just reading, it becomes really stilted. We're having a conversation. So you just maybe have a few points written down and the key points you want to make. So you need to prepare. And that's what we're saying. You need prompts. So you might just have it on literally on the back of an envelope or something that you take out of your pocket, and you just put it down in front of you to remember the key points. But it's not lots and lots of paper and you're saying, hold on now till I get to page blah-de, 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 blah, and you're losing time and you're losing their focus. So just something simple. As I said, a card or in the back of an envelope or something that you can put in your pocket, and you just take out and you have it in front of you, and you just remember, oh yeah, they're the points I want to make. So that's just have your key points there. And so you know what you're going to do. And one of the things that might even be a key point is, for example, write their name down, just so as you know who they are, because there's nothing as off-putting to you, actually in particular, not so much to them, as because you then think, oh my God, you're then become embarrassed and you're thinking, oh God, I made a mess of that and whatever. And you lose track of what you're doing. So maybe there might be some important details you just put down there as a little prompt to remind yourself. So a couple of things. You probably will be a bit nervous before you have an encounter like that, particularly if you've never actually either visited somebody or had a call with them or whatever. So a couple of things to say about that. So that's why preparation actually helps with the nerves, but giving yourself time to prepare. So by preparation, I don't mean literally 5 minutes before you go into the meeting, or you're meeting them at 10 and there you are with your cup of coffee at 9 o'clock and you're busily thinking, oh, Jesus, what am I going to say? You give yourself time to prepare. One of the great things about doing it, maybe doing it, say, the day before, for example, or a couple of days before, it allows you, your head, then your subconscious is thinking about it. And then you say, oh yeah, well, actually, I'll drop that point and I'll add that one in, or there's a nice little story I've remembered. It helps you maybe enrich what you're doing. Give yourself time to do it. So certainly at least a couple of days before you meet them, think out what you're going to do. And that'll give your, as I said, your subconscious, you'll get used to it. And maybe look at the notes again. So 2 days before you do it, the following day, just look at it again and say, okay, maybe I'll drop that or do that again. And then you just have a quick refresh before you go in and you have your notes in front of you and you know what you're doing. So the great thing about it is then is what's really important is that you own what you're going to say rather than it owning you. And the difference, I suppose I'm saying in that is, or what the difference is, you know, I would say by the time you come to your second meeting, your third meeting, you'll be on top of your game because you'll know what it is, you're confident. And in fact, what happens is then you'll adjust, you'll sort of do things slightly differently. And you need to, depending on who the person is, maybe tweak it depending on the person. But the great thing is the more you own it, then the more then it sort of, it becomes you rather than it dominating you. So it's always great to have a little bit of an icebreaker. And this comes in where from your little bit of research, say, oh, I believe you know blah, 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 or you might know my brother, my sister, my blah, blah, blah. It's always a great way, or you went to school with, or whatever. These things are always great ways of actually breaking the ice with somebody. And then they become a person. Oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, one of the things I often find is, you know, for example, is, oh, I saw you at the match, or your team was in, or, you know, are you delighted with, or whatever, you know, whatever it is, just find a little way of connecting with somebody, of breaking the ice. And then it just becomes a person-to-person conversation. Eye contact is really important, you know, and so that's why I don't want you reading something, because the problem is if you're reading, you're looking down. It breaks the connection. So just have if you have a couple of notes, you can just glance down and then you're talking to them. Facial connection is critical. If you're reading and then and blah, 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 and the UNCRPD says it's boring, it's monotonous, but most importantly, it breaks the eye contact. The eye contact is key. So you also as well too, you need to smile. Consciously smile. Maybe at the beginning, what your couple of things to do is at the beginning when you come in, and here are things what you do is you like, listen, thanks very much for meeting me. I really appreciate it. Smile. You know, you can bump elbows if you're meeting them in person, or if it's online, you can wave and say, hi, listen, thank you so much. Really appreciate you meeting me. So smile consciously, you do this to break the ice at the beginning, and it becomes a human interaction rather than something more stiff and formal. Okay, so, but the other thing just be aware of is they probably won't be aware that you're nervous. The person who's aware of the nerves is you. The biggest critic in the room is you. And we're all the same, whether we have mental health challenges or not. We are all the same. The biggest critic resides in this body. And so what they perceive of you is actually usually hugely different from how you perceive yourself. So just be aware of that. And the other thing is, if you are feeling a bit nervous, actually say it. Say, look, this is my first time talking to somebody about this, so I'm a little bit nervous. Or should they'll be eating out of your hands after that. They'll be doing their best. They'll be all over you like a rash. They'll be so supportive. And that's actually a useful device sometimes too, is just to say that, look, this is my first time doing this. It really matters to me, but so I'm a little bit nervous about it. So, you know, if you just be a bit patient, or, you know, I appreciate your support around that. Jesus, they'll be so on your side. It'll be unbelievable. So just be aware of that. So a couple of things too. It's really important, again, part of the preparation. Think about either how or where you're going to meet them. So you'll generally get half an hour. So you need to just, that's why you need to get to the point. The last thing you need to do is fill 25 minutes of that half an hour, and they've only 5 minutes then to come back on you. And then it'll just be, yeah, we'll look at whatever. You need to hear from them. You need to get them to say, so what's your response? And how are you going to, what are you going to do about this? Now, not in the sense of, what are you going to do? It's more, so look, I'd like to, you know, how can you help this situation? What are your thoughts about how you can help, you know, make sure we implement this convention? What are your thoughts on how you can help improve the level of investment? What are your thoughts about how we can deal with the medical card issue? So you need time for that. So you need to plan it out. So if we've got, so generally I would say, don't go over 10 minutes, a third. You know, have 10 minutes for, you know, the hi, hello, what you've got to say, 10 minutes maybe of their response, and maybe then back and forth between then you responding to their response. So that's why it's really important to prepare, because if you go in, as I said, and you fill 25 minutes, sure, then you've got nothing back from them. The purpose of this is to have an engagement. It's about a to-ing and fro-ing. So third you, a third them, and then a third back and forth between you. Okay? So you need to time it. So one of the things, if you've got prepared something, is you might get somebody to listen to you. Do your pitch. So you might do it to one of your, if you're in a group, then that could be part of it. So if they're local groups or whatever, you can work with somebody on that. If you're not, maybe it's your partner, brother, sister, son, father, mother, whatever it is. But somebody who'll give you honest feedback on it, who knows the situation. And even on a very basic level, who can time you and say, oh yeah, that was 20 minutes. Because we all think, oh sure, that was only 5 minutes, and then it ends up being 15. So just, you need to time yourself. And another thing too, be on time. In fact, be early. So if you're on Zoom, be on it at 5 to, you know, or if you're physically meeting somebody, be there early. Because the worst thing is, because it's okay, they will probably be late because they're under pressure. But if you're late, it sets a bad tone. But also too, again, you're playing catch up. You're then, oh, sorry for being late and whatever. So for example, if you're driving somewhere, get there in time so you can find somewhere to park. Or if you're getting the bus, you get the bus in plenty of time, so if you get there early, get yourself a cup of coffee. You know, but it takes the pressure off. It really heaps pressure on you if you're late. So they're all important things about how you can reduce the nerves and the pressure on yourself. It's about preparation. So including preparing your journey to get there, to meet them, when and where, and so that you're able to do it properly. Okay? And then the content, we're going to come back to the content in a minute, but the key to good content is telling stories. And we're going to look at some examples of storytelling in the video clips after the break, okay? that's what we're going to do. Some examples of storytelling. But it really is coming back to, so if you're talking about the impact of, for example, talking about medical card, if you are, you know, for instance, affected by the medical card question in terms of your ability to go back to work or into education, well, talk about that. Or, you know, talk about the impact of the lack of investment in services. So the delays in waiting to avail of services, or I had a first appointment, you know, an assessment, but I'm now waiting for so long for follow-up. And what impact has that had on you? How has it affected your recovery? How has it made your situation worse? How has that impacted on people around you? You need to think about that. So just in particular, think about stories that help to illustrate and bring it alive, because it's the stories that then becomes like, oh, right, I get it. So it's not just about theory. This is actually real human impacts of the problems with our services. And that will bring it to life for them. Timing, we talked about that, and that's really important. And that's where the practice comes in. So, you know, okay, grand, you know, I've got that down. So to the time you need to do, and practice. And you practice out loud. Don't practice in your head, because we all speak much quicker in our head than actually when we deliver in real time. We actually speak more slowly in real life than we speak inside or in our own head. So that's why we need to speak it out and maybe get somebody else to listen back or time it or whatever. Put a stopwatch on it. You can do it yourself. All of your phones have a clock function on them, and there'll be a stopwatch function on that too as well. So delivering it. This woman spoke at, and I'm trying to remember her name now, an amazing young poet, American young poet. So she spoke at the Joe Biden's inauguration earlier this year. And let me do a quick scoot here on Google and see if I can work out, remember what her name is here. So poet Biden inauguration. So Amanda Gorman. If you ever get a chance, go on to YouTube and just look at the full thing. I think it only lasts 5 or 6 minutes. But just, it was, I remember looking at it, it was the most magnificent performance. And just look at her. She's smiling. Her head is up. So remember what I was saying? So her head is up. She's using her hands. She's communicating with all of the body that you can see. Her clothes are also communicating something as well. She's colorful. She's dynamic. And it's like, wow, there's confidence. But I'm not expecting everybody to be wearing yellow coats and red hairbands. But, you know, it's, you know, you do need very much to be yourself. But just remember that just in a snapshot is about how important, you know, the visual is. Eye contact, as I said, eye contact and use of your hands. And of course, your voice, the tone and tenor of your voice are really critical. They are as important as the content of what you're saying. So if you're sitting, if you're like this with a scowl on your face, that's very much communicating to them, I don't trust you, I don't like you. And so that's one thing you don't do. So you don't fold your arms. You hold your hands, just hold your hands like this. If you're at a desk, for example, on the table, and that allows you to use your hands when you're talking to them, but use the hands in a conversational way. And I said this last week, not finger pointing, not banging the table, not dismissing, giving out, you know, that stern face, enthusiasm, energy, but we're talking to them, eye contact. The other thing too, and she used this, If at the beginning you're feeling yourself getting a little bit nervous, just simply slow down. One of the things I always do is just literally, if you're at a desk or table, and including, say, if you're doing it, say, on Zoom, plant your feet on the table. Sorry, your feet on the floor, not on the table. Jesus, we don't want you standing on the table to woo woo, but plant your feet on the floor. Hold on to the table, literally root yourself and breathe slowly. And it's not even just, it's not the in breath so much as the out breath. So maybe 3 slow in breaths and 3 slow out breaths. And you literally root yourself, gather yourself, hold yourself, and then engage. You'll probably think it's an eternity. Actually, it'll go so quickly. But the other thing too is, I've used that device as well in situations to literally take command of a room. It was one of the old devices. I was a teacher in a previous life. And sometimes you'd come into a noisy classroom, you just stand at the top of the room and say nothing. Because if you try to compete with all the voices, and then suddenly you're going, oh, hold on. And then people sort of calm down. So it is about taking command of the situation. And actually, space, silence can be a very helpful way of just, I'm in control here. I'm in command. So final slide before we take our break. And this is somebody I think who's a really good presenter, Nicola Sturgeon, who's the First Minister of Scotland. But it's partly as well too, just looking at, we talked about clothes. So it's just, we talked about keeping things simple and whatever. So, you know, if you're going, you need to have the hair properly done. So you need to dress or hold yourself in the way you would expect them to do the same. So you don't have to be, you're not a world leader, so you don't have to wear a suit. But certainly it's important, we want to make, you know, the old adage, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So you do want to appear as if you're business-like, you're serious about what you're doing. So, you know, so just, you know, have the hair brushed or combed or whatever way it is so that you look neat, but also more important that you feel you look well. Because if you feel you look well, then that really helps. That actually does matter. So if you feel you look well, oh, I look $1 million here, you'll feel $1 million, and that will give you that pep in your step, that confidence to perform. So actually those things matter, but it matters to you in the first instance. And in the second instance, again, too, the thing, oh, God, yeah, they look well. They seem serious about their business. So dress is important. The body language, again, look at Nicola Sturgeon, eyes focused on the person she's talking to, using her hands in a conversational way. So all of those things are important. So as I say, no arms folded, no hands in the pocket, which is, yeah, here, casual. Use your hands. And as I say, talk like an Italian, use them in an expressive way, but in an inclusive way. You're bringing them in. And you will see when we come to some of the examples on the video clips just of that. So that's enough for the moment. And we're going to have a break now. Is that, anyone, any questions? Does that all make sense? Okay. So we're going to take a break now. We'll be back at 11:30. And then we're going to look at some video clips. And we're going to open that up. Then I want to look at some video clips and I want to get your feedback on them, your thoughts on them. And we'll take it from there. Is that okay?
Great. Thanks, Pat.
11:30. See you then. Okay.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Just share some video clip. Can you see that video? Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it, Pat.
Right. Okay. So
yeah, I can see it, Pat.
Thanks very much, Peter. Appreciate that. Thank you. So, going back. Damn. Sorry. Now.
and your conscience. So I just think
insurance point of view, has consideration been made of it?
And they can force the management company to take over the development in its.
So, okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you a clip from last year of somebody talking about their own experience for an Oireachtas committee. And I will then give you a little bit of sort of context afterwards. So just bear with me on this. So,
defective state and not have to pay out from the proceeds of sale. So there are two very significant decisions that really close off what management company.
Not this person will be the next.
Of getting some money from receivers.
It's in line. And Ms. Holland, do you want to come in on that? Deputy O'Brien asked you if you want to make a comment on that.
Sure, no, thank you. As Owen mentioned, I own a 2-bedroom apartment in Sturgeon that had fire defects. We were informed in December 2018 and levied €16,250 a month later. So we were in a fortunate position in that most of people have paid up, and in summer 2019, all those fire issues were remedied. My developer is still in operation. He actually was recently granted planning permission just down the road from me. I objected to Dún Laoghaire County Council to that planning application on the basis of Section 35 of the Planning Act, but unfortunately they didn't uphold my objection and they were granted planning permission. So the County Council were fully aware that they previously built defective homes and they hadn't complied with the granted fire certificate, but they granted them planning permission anyway. So I just feel so let down, and I'm kind of shocked and disgusted that this is allowed, that the regulatory environment just doesn't work. It doesn't protect the innocent people. I have 2 little girls and I put them to bed all their little lives in a fire defective home, and it's not right. And more important to me than getting any money back from the €16,000 I paid is making my developer accountable and responsible for what he's done and ensuring that this doesn't happen again, so that when my little girls grow up, I can say to them, yes, I fought for something to improve it and to make this right, and also that they could buy an apartment in the future, because the way it stands at the moment, I would say absolutely to anybody not to buy an apartment because you are not protected and you don't know what you're buying. I bought my apartment secondhand, so I did everything right. I got a surveyor out, he inspected the property and he signed it off. Unless he took down the ceilings, the walls, the vents, he wouldn't have known the deficiencies that lay beneath. The only person who did was the developer, and we've really been utterly failed by not only the developer, but by the government. And I've been in touch with everybody. When I first found out about this in December 2018, I was in touch with the council, the fire officer, the housing minister. Looking for support. I did this and I vow that I will keep working on this until I do, and that my developer is held accountable for what he's done to us.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes.
So the reason I was showing that was that there were a lot of people sort of on making presentations, talking about facts, figures, and statistics. And what was fascinating was that most of then the sort of TDs and senators who were at that meeting, when they heard her talking about putting her 2 daughters to bed in an apartment that was fire defective or whatever, it was like, okay, particularly those who were parents were immediately thinking, okay, right, that's not right. And so they just, it totally changed the dynamic of that meeting when they heard that woman talking about. So that's just, I suppose, an example of how you can talk about, you can make something from being a dry technical issue into something that connects, because anybody there at that meeting who was a parent who has tucked their kids into bed could immediately go, that could be me, or I know somebody who does that. And it reached people. And I know it did because I got the feedback afterwards. Sorry, this was something I was involved in setting up professionally. and working on it. Sort of, I mentioned it earlier on, it's the major project I'm working on, but you could literally physically see in the room the difference when she talked about me, my experience, her feelings, her experience. That was something that connected immediately. And there were a number of people in particular who after that said, okay, we have to do something about this. So that literally reached people emotionally. And this comes back to what I said, that communication starts here and then goes there. So this is why storytelling is so important, is because it reaches here and people start listening. They start thinking about it. Oh God, that could be me. Whereas if it's dry and facts and figures and all the rest of it, it's like, yeah, yada, 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 yada. But when it's about experience, then it's like, oh, because I'm immediately thinking that could be me or somebody I know. And then it's real. Okay. So any comments on that? Just what Ciara said at that particular hearing?
Just to say that she also like really knew her stuff. And so like while she was passionate, she was informative, and you know, the passion came across, but she knew what she was talking about as well. So it just was really powerful, I think. Yeah. What was gas was about Ciara, and you are right. Ciara works in the finance sector. So she would be, you know, a senior manager in one of the finance companies in Ireland. And so she's used to sort of, you know, dealing at a very high level. But what was interesting was she was nervous about doing this, not about speaking, but what was fascinating was I was texting her all the time and saying, Ciara, jump in, because I knew what she had to say, jump in. And she wouldn't. So eventually what happened was one of the members of the committee specifically asked her a question, because he knew that she was really good, coming back to the passion, and that she would be able to cut through to people. And so yeah. So, okay, I'm going to move on to another clip. So just bear with me. So, okay. So just stop this. So. Yeah, so this is a woman who spoke recently to Frances Haugen, who spoke about Facebook recently before a Senate committee in America. So just want to give you a little flavor of that.
We break out of our previous regulatory frames. Facebook wants to trick you into thinking that privacy protections or changes to Section 230.
Damn, hold on. I need to just...
Section 230 alone will be sufficient. While important, these will not get to the core of the issue, which is that no one truly understands the destructive choices made by Facebook except Facebook. We can afford nothing less than full transparency. As long as Facebook is operating in the shadows, hiding its research from public scrutiny, it is unaccountable. Until the incentives change, Facebook will not change. Left alone, Facebook will continue to make choices that go against the common good, our common good. When we realized big tobacco was hiding the harms it caused, the government took action. When we figured out cars were safer with seatbelts, the government took action. And when our government learned that opioids were taking lives, the government took action. I implore you to do the same here.
So, what was her message there?
She's kind of saying that, you know, you can't trust Facebook, they're operating undercover, and that the truth needs to be told to the greater public.
And what needs to happen to ensure that
The government needs to step up.
exactly, the government needs to take action. And what examples did she give of where the government took action against in other contexts?
She referenced the seatbelts.
Excellent.
And she referenced the opiates.
Exactly. And she mentioned one other thing as well.
Tobacco, cigarettes.
Tobacco. Correct. So she
public
was
health message. Sorry.
Yes, go on.
It's a matter of public health. She's bringing Facebook into that arena.
Exactly.
About damaging health.
Exactly. And so look at her demeanor. Does she look threatening? Does she look as if she's given out?
No, in actual fact, what I found about looking at her body language was that, yes, she was reading the facts, but she was clarifying them and also looking up from the facts.
Correct.
Looking at the committee.
So every now and again. So when you get to the queue,
to actually make that point.
When we get, exactly. So we'll just see, can we get to, here's the Q&A.
Wants more party-related content.
Interesting. Thank you. That's very helpful. And what that suggests to me is that while they're saying they're not targeting teens with those ads, the algorithm might do some of that work for them, which might explain why they collect the data, even while claiming that they're not targeting those ads in that way.
I can't speak to whether or not that's the intention, but the reality is it's very, very, very difficult to understand these algorithms today. And over and over and over again, we saw these biases the algorithms unintentionally learn. And so, yeah, it's very hard to disentangle out these factors as long as you have engagement-based ranking.
Thank you, Ms. Haugen.
So just was more about, again, you look at her face. So once we're getting into the Q&A, her use of her hands. So, you know, she's energized. So that's important, Ed. So that was just more, you were right. She was reading earlier on. And that's actually, and sometimes if you're called, and would actually happen here in Ireland, if you're actually called before a formal committee, so you're not that's not where you're going with this, you yourselves, then, you know, there is a formality about it and all the rest of it. So what people tend to do is they send in an opening statement, as she would have done, and then you read it out. And then the real stuff begins when you've got the Q&A. So she's looking at the member member's looking at her, look at her eyes. She's looking straight out the member. And so this is partly thing too. How can you know that you can, that if somebody's saying something to you that's on the level, it's, are they prepared? You know, you look at them, see, are they telling me lies, or are they actually, and if they're looking away or avoiding your gaze, then you think, can you trust them? That's why eye contact is so important. It's about establishing trust. It's about relationships. And looking at her there is she maintains the eye contact because it's about trust. Okay, so we're going to stop this one here. Let me just come out of this one, and then I want to go to yeah, there's another one here. Yes, so this is somebody who's, I think, is a great storyteller. And so let's have a look at this.
Oh, if there's a better Mrs. O out there. Who's a better Mrs. O? Let's think about that for a second. But I had to tell him, Gail,
Video isn't playing there, Pat. We still just see the screenshot of the Facebook product manager.
But you can also see as well that your man is taking notes from what she's saying, which is, you know, some people just look and ask the question and turn away again, but he's actually listened to her.
Exactly, yeah, he seems to be engaged with her.
Hi, Pat. I don't know if you can hear me, but we lost the sound.
I'll just send Pat a text because I'm not sure if he can hear us.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We have you.
Can you see the video?
Yes, we can see it,
but we can't hear it.
Ah, can you not?
No.
Ah, damn. I don't know why that is. That's weird.
Maybe
Could
it
you
was
hear the
because
previous
you were
video?
on mute.
Maybe that's why. Maybe, can you hear it now?
Waffles and Mochi have
Yes,
teamed
yeah,
up
we
with partnership for
Let me just
Healthier
go back.
America.
Just because there's some messaging here. Apologies. Thanks, Peter.
Something that's important to me. You've got to have courage, Mochi, or we'll never really learn how to cook. Whoa! It sends a message beyond food and fun. You know, there's always a theme about love and acceptance and openness. It's just a gentle reminder to young kids. We want to teach them this rare gift of empathy.
And now that mission continues with the former First Lady's Pass the Love initiative. Waffles and Mochi have teamed up with the Partnership for a Healthier America to provide meal kits to families in need, inspired by recipes from the show. And today, Mrs. Obama is announcing the first target cities.
You know, we look at cities where there was need, and many of our urban areas have been struggling under COVID. So we could have gone to any city, but Atlanta and Cleveland were sort of prime.
We've lost the sound again.
Pat, are you there? I think the video is just paused again. I think his connection might have dropped off.
Modern technology.
I know. Exactly. Oh, he's back again there. Pat, I think you might have dropped off for a second, did you? You're just on mute still. I think he's frozen.
So, sorry, I was having connectivity problems. So that's sorted now. So let me just go back to this piece here. So yeah.
Along with the recipes.
My children are now 34 and 35.
Yeah.
And I wish, you know, cooking is not my forte. I look at how they were raised on SpaghettiOs, fish sticks, tater tots.
Yeah.
And if I had a regret about parenting, that would be it.
But we were growing up, we were raising our kids in a different time, you
Yeah.
know, when we didn't
Yes,
know.
free me, Mrs. Obama.
Yeah,
free
but
me,
when,
yes.
when we didn't know that all the quick, fast options were not that healthy.
Yeah, it's true.
We didn't know that.
It is true.
And so that's why the education piece is important, because we can't beat ourselves up for stuff we didn't know. And now more and more families understand this, and that they also can see that they can cook an affordable meal quickly, save money and time.
In the years since her family left the White House, Mrs. Obama.
So, okay, just going to come out of that there. So any just comments, apologies for the breaking the thing there. Any comments just about Michelle Obama and how she tells her stories?
She's always so measured. You know, you can tell it's something that's close to her heart and something that she wants to fix about her past. But she's very relatable, you know. She's relatable to the co-host as well. But when she delivers her speech or she talks about something, even though she is able to adequately display her passion, she's also very measured.
And thanks for that, Roisin. Any other comments about Michelle Obama? Thanks for that.
She doesn't seem like she's...
Sorry, go on, Finola.
Thanks. She doesn't seem like she's placing the blame on anyone, which is probably important in mental health advocacy as well.
Yeah, so she's talking about, so rather than going into, as she said, look, you know, we didn't, you know, you can't sort of hold somebody responsible for stuff we didn't know then. We can't blame people. So this is going back to maybe some of the food that maybe, you know, we ate in the past that wasn't healthy, but we didn't know that then. But it's about what do we do now and in the future, as distinct from whose fault is it for the past.
And her body language was very precise of her eyes, even when she was talking with her hands. She actually put her hands straight out as to say, this is the point I'm trying to make.
But her eye contact never deviates.
No.
Exactly. So she always has her gaze on, you know, the person she's talking to. And so exactly that. She has so this comes back to the empathy. A lot of that comes is from your body language and your eye contact and also your voice, how you do it. So do you come across as somebody who's understanding as distinct from, I'm the expert and I'm telling you, you know? So
I think we've missed an awful lot of that as well for the last couple of years with the Zoom contacts, because I always find if you're in a room with people, you can see the reactions a lot quicker than you can, and it's very hard to actually see the reactions of people if you're telling them a story or if you're telling a point, because you cannot see their reactions.
And this is why actually what's great on this sort of format, at least, you know, when people have their screens on, we can see each other and we can pick up some of that. We can pick up some of the body language. We can pick up some of the cues from the other person, because that's successful conversation. It's a two-way thing. It's you say something, I say something back. I sort of, oh, right, and whatever. So, and a lot of it, of course, is nonverbal. It's eyes, hands, facial expressions, all of that, all of which are important. So, but she is good. I mean, particularly too, she is hugely popular, particularly with women, because of that empathy. But she's also a straight talker, you know, and saying, look, you know, this is an issue for health. So something that needs to be sorted. Okay. So now I'm just going to go on to the last clip here. So just bear with me. And I think this is the last one. No, it's not that one there. It's this one here. So yeah, Keith Earls from the Late Late Show last Friday night.
Diagnosis because I was genuinely losing my mind, and you know, people around me were being hurt, and you know, and particularly Del, who I'm living with, she's seen the, you know, the highs and lows, and, you know, just bizarre behaviour. And he told me go away and we'll have a look, because I'm an athlete, about medication. And I just told him straight out, I said, I'm not leaving your office till you write me a prescription for some tablet to just make me feel better and make me feel like myself again.
Did they work?
I suppose, like, obviously with the tablets, he gave me a lot of coping mechanisms as well. He told me go and research it and, you know, go speak to a cognitive behaviour therapist. And yeah, look, I have been great. I still have my bad days, but it definitely stabled me. And you know, thankfully the last couple of years I've got a great hold on it. You know, I found my identity, you know, which I think was a part of the problem as well. I didn't know who I was, and I was always trying to be other people. I didn't know when I was Keith, I didn't know when I was Hank. And thankfully I can tell the difference now.
It's just, first of all, thank you for telling her stuff.
So an interesting sort of experience just from, I was last Friday night on the Late Late Show. So did any of you see that? Yeah, it's part of a bigger interview with Keith Earls, and but certainly it caused a lot of discussion because he talked about his diagnosis with you know, was bipolar, and he talked about that. So Peter, we were talking about that last week, isn't that right? Just and he was talking about that, and a lot of people, what was useful about it was that a lot of people, now there was a bigger interview as well, but a lot of people, I would suspect that would maybe be one of the first times they would have had a discussion about bipolar or whatever, but certainly it provoked and opened up a discussion which was, I think, very positive and healthy. And but just coming back to the thing about what you can do as individuals, I'm not asking you to go on the Late Late Show or whatever, but even coming back to actually having a discussion with your public representatives, and you're talking about me, my situation, or somebody you know, is much more tangible and real. And even look at Ryan Tuberty's response. You're going to get a much more empathetic response than just talking about facts, figures, investment, blah, 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 blah. When you're talking about me and my, as Ciara Holland was, or even, you know, when Michelle Obama was talking about her experience as a mom and cooking, people relate to that in a way they don't to all the big facts and figures. They relate to it. And it's not just because Keith Earls is, you know, well known as a celeb, but it was actually more because just he was, you could see it wasn't easy for him. You could see that this was a big step, and people related to that and were, I think, terribly empathetic about it. But anyway, any thoughts on that? Did any of you see it in the first place?
No, I missed it. But the only thing is that I do feel, Pat, is that there's a lot of service users out there that have told their stories, and
Yes.
it's taken an awful lot out of them to tell their stories.
Yes.
But nothing has been done since. Do you know what I mean? So I think really, I do agree that we have to talk about mental health, and I do agree that it has to be brought out more. But unfortunately, you know, is it being overstepped?
You're right.
By bringing in celebrities, a lot of people that actually live with bipolar just turn around and say, well, here we go again. Do you know what I mean? And they lose interest.
I hear that. What I would say is I'm not looking at the particular as more just a general thing about actually experience. And I want to come back to the point you made at the beginning. You're right. Simply telling your story in and of itself isn't going to sort the issue. And we did talk about last week.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that.
No. I'm I'm not doing this like the moon show and saying, well, if you were here last week and you were, that's not.
No, Pat. All I'm saying is that
I get it. No, just bear with me for a minute.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is persistence. It does take persistence. It means going back. You've had an initial conversation and you go back to them in a few weeks. What have you done about it? What's the update? What's happening? A few weeks later. So what's the story now? It does take that persistence as well. That isn't easy. So, and particularly too, if you're not feeling well, it isn't easy. Absolutely understand that.
No, it's not even that, Pat. It's just the fact that I think that the HSE are out there at the moment and they're promoting this, that, and the other thing, right? And what really annoys me about the whole thing, and I'm within the mental health services for the last 20 years with my son and myself, but what I'm saying is that in that 20 years, it has got worse. That has got better. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
even
I do.
With all their ideas of saying stories count, stories matter, come out and talk about mental health. That's fine. I have no problem in doing that. I will do it anywhere and anything, and I have no problem in doing that. But what I feel is that people that are doing that, they're getting very tired now. And I mean, it's to me, if I had to go and retell my story of my son and what I went through 20 years ago, I would still find it very emotional today as I would when I first spoke about it.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And I think is going back, for people to go back, and as you say, with communication and everything, you get burnt out from it, you get tired. And
absolutely.
I really feel that it's with all the work that's being done outside of the HSC, right? And I mean, I know there's an awful lot of good work being done outside it. And I know with Keith Earls there now, that because you could see with his eyes, he was very uncomfortable telling his story.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable. And you could see the body language with them as well. This was something that he was telling for the first time in public. Do you know what I mean?
But you look at that image there of his pursed lips.
Yeah.
He's somebody who absolutely, it's stressed.
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying too about weariness, and absolutely understand that. And, you know, this is why actually, you know, we need a bigger cohort of people, because asking the same people to keep marching up, you know, the hill over and over and over again, it's very difficult to sustain that. And I suppose what we're looking to try to do, Cara, with this is to create a bigger pool of people so that there's more support. But I agree, there are times when, I mean, I've experienced it myself. So I did, again, said the last day, I had a depressive episode 5 years ago. I wasn't able to, for all of this. I'm in a much different place over the last 4 years, and and much better place. But you're right. I had no energy. I just didn't want to do stuff. So it's not easy. But I suppose coming back to some of the examples, all I would say is that if and when people feel they're in a position to do it, it can be very powerful.
Oh, it is. And I agree with you, Pat.
Yeah.
It is very powerful if you get the right people to listen.
Yes.
Sorry now, but I'm very cynical about the whole thing.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. Well, I think we're very much on the same page, Cara. And I too get weary at times. I get weary, particularly, with people who know stuff but aren't doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And at times I do. I feel like putting my fist through people at times. But I have to. I find other ways.
We all, I know, and I'm being honest with you, we all have to curb our tongue, and that's one of the difficult things about it.
Yes.
Because if we lose it, it puts a bad image on what's there, right? And it's what I feel is that with communication, and as I say now, with Keith Earls there, he was very nervous, he was very tense.
Yeah.
You could see it in his body language.
Absolutely.
You could see Ryan Tuberty there being very intense, you know, he was very intense in listening. But
yeah,
at the end of it, Ryan Tubridy can go home
correct.
and forget
Absolutely.
about it.
Understood.
And this is where I feel, are we losing something in our communication with people?
I tell you what, I think I don't know if that's so much. I think what we need is we need more people like you, Cara, so that you're not so much on your own. And I think that the more pitch in on this, then the more effective it becomes. Okay. I think
no, Pat, I mean, everybody in mental health knows me now at this stage, because I'm one of these devil's advocates that I ask the questions.
Good.
But the thing about it is, what I'm saying is that it's for new people coming in, right? And to try and get them to communicate in the proper way, which I know what you're trying to do here, right? And I think it's very hard to give those skills to somebody who's unwell. Okay.
Absolutely is.
Right.
And
it could take years for that person to actually turn around and say, I'm ready to. And my son won't talk about his condition as 20 years later. Do you know what I mean?
And I would never ask, Cara, just to be clear, and we're going to move on if you don't mind.
No problem.
The next piece. But just to say, I would never ask anybody to put themselves in a place where they felt unsafe, whatever, at all.
Sorry, I've just had my rant, Pat, so it's all right.
Oh, absolutely. But no, just to be clear, you're right. Because what we don't want to do is yes, it's, you know, I don't mind if somebody feels a little bit nervous, but what I don't want to do is for somebody to feel in any way undermined or unwell or unsafe, because that's self-defeating.
Yes.
But, you know, it's a balance of things. But so what I want to do now is I want to come back to something now. So I want you to take a little bit of time. We're going to break into two groups. So want to break it into, as I said, into two groups where I want you to look at, okay, so based on what are the things that if there were two things you could say you're meeting your local politician, maybe just work up in the groups. What are maybe the couple of messages you might give to them just to try and help us begin the process of preparation for those meetings? So let's just take a period of, say, let's go up to 12:25 and to do that, okay? So we're going to put you into two breakout groups. So just our two messages, it could be three at most, but I want at least two messages that you're going to communicate to your local politician at your meeting. So imagine, just take an imaginary politician at your meeting. So what are the couple of points you're going to make them off the back of this that would maybe get them listening, focused, paying attention to the need for change in mental health services, okay? Back from the two groups. So who are the two nominated spokespersons?
I would nominate Cara.
Yeah, Cara. They're pretty good.
Okay, so Pat, what we come up with was integrated and continuity of care will be one of the big things that we found.
Right.
That was one of the big issues that would be there. Right.
So tell me, how would you just tell me what's the problem with the lack of integration based on your experience on continuity of care?
Well, it's basically what I would say to you now is that if we just take gambling and we'll take mental health, right? Yeah. If you're a gambler and you have a mental health issue, you'll be sent to one or the other services. If you go to a gambling service and you have a mental health issue, they can't deal with you. And if you go to a mental health service, you have a gambling issue, so we can't. But they never integrate the two together to make them work, so that there's a double whammy there. Do you know what I mean? This dual diagnosis thing is one of the biggest problems that's out there, right?
Exactly. Okay,
Now,
excellent. Okay.
My question to the politician would be is, on your dual diagnosis program that you're pushing with the HSC, how come there's not enough money in for the mental health, and that you do say you give the mental health X amount of money every year? But I know for a fact, and I've been told by a politician, that's on paper.
Yes.
Right? That money that we should be getting, our 70 million or our 35 million or whatever, if there's a hole in any other service,
right,
it's taken from the mental health. Right? And I know that for a fact.
That's true.
And the thing about it is that if they're very serious about mental health, and they're going to have a huge problem after the COVID on this.
Yes.
And you can see it with depression and anxiety and with online gambling, and you can see it with drink, and you can see all that sort of thing. But they're not putting the money in the right places. There's no continuity of care. I mean, Dominic had to get some type of therapy, but he had to move, he had to go and travel because it wasn't in his catchment area.
Right.
The catchment area thing, I'm sorry, is just a joke. It's the mental health services for both families and for and especially for the service users, the continuity of care, even if they have a physical complaint. I mean, Peter was given wrong medication, which could have killed him, right?
Yeah.
Now, to me, there doesn't. It's the medical model is there, but it's getting better. But the medical model do not want to know the recovery model. The recovery model aren't strong enough to push it in to get the medical care reversed, you know, the roads reversed. Okay. Mental health engagement have tried it, mental health reform have tried it, Mental Health Ireland have tried it. And as I say, I'm doing this for 20 years and I can see it the whole time.
Thanks, Cara. Do you mind if we bring in somebody else as well?
Yeah, no, but that was the one point. And the other point was that the other question we would have asked them was local services. As a politician, why aren't you pushing for the local service to be standardized all over the country?
Okay. Cara, thanks very much for that. Does anyone else from that group want to come in?
I'll just come in, Pat, for a minute. Now, these so-called psychiatrists, they will prescribe you anything. Long as you're walking and talking, you go in to see them and the conversation goes on for about probably 15 minutes. And all they're doing is reaching for a prescription pad. And off you go. And you don't know when you're going to see them again. Now, they can't blame it all on COVID, and they can't blame it all on a cyber attack, because patients' records in psych hospitals are paper form. They're all paper records, so they can't blame it on a cyber attack.
Thanks, Peter. Now, the other group, does anyone want to come in? Who's speaking on behalf of the other group?
I can.
Twice. Fair play to you, Claire.
No, it's grand. I don't mind at all. So I was in a group with Roisin, Fionnuala and Ciara. So Fionnuala kind of started off saying that the institutions in Ireland that we no longer have kind of, they've shifted to this community-based housing, but like an institution should not be defined by the size of it, and it's still an institution, and still the same practices that are unlawful are happening in them, and there's a massive lack of integration for the people in those institutions to the community. And then she made the point that Article 19, I think it was, of the UNCRPD is that people with mental health difficulties have a right to choose who and where they want to live. So these community-based housings are basically breaking the UNCRPD. Okay. So that keeps it very, very political and very on point. And then Roisin came in with another excellent point, Roisin is trying to get into counselling and psychology, and she is having to work full time and study then off the back of that, and then to go on and do her master's is going to cost another fortune, and then after that then to do a PhD is costing another fortune. So it's, and then you're going into a job where you don't necessarily know what salary you're coming away with. So it's really, really prohibitive to people who want to retrain and have the passion to go in and to make sure that there are enough counsellors there. And then we discussed a little bit about so if somebody maybe had taken some time off, if they had a mental health difficulty themselves, coming back into education, similar to Roisin, or if they wanted to come back into work, even, you know, losing their medical card, losing their disability, and all those prohibitive barriers that are there. And then lastly, Ciara came in and then just talked about how there was a lack of knowledge in the services for like early intervention in psychosis, which again would be related back to what Roisin was saying, that if people were more educated and if there was easier access for people to train and more counsellors, that just wouldn't be as much of an issue. So yeah, I think that's.
Thanks, Claire. That's
guys,
great.
do you guys have anything else to say?
Roisin or Ciara or Fionnuala, do you want to come in?
Thanks for that. That was really good. You remembered so much more than I would have. But yes, the you know, it's just, we know that Ireland in general needs more, you know, psychologists. We know that, you know, the same amount of money going in now is probably, you know, the same as it was back in the 80s. You know, there's been, you know, as things that cause more distress to people have come more prevalent, like social media and stuff, you know, affecting anorexia and eating disorders in younger people, anxiety and depression on the up all the time in Ireland. But we're not, you know, we're not getting, there's no funding, there's very little funding for people to go on to do the doctorate or the PhD, when by master's level, you've already put thrown 16 grand at a degree, another 10 or 12 at a master's, and then you have to go back down and start at the very bottom and wait for maybe 3 or 4 years of rejection to get into Trinity or UCD to do your doctorate, which is funded by the HSE, but that's, you know, that's another thing. It's very elitist. And my point, I suppose, is that in a country where we need so much more, and where the services are not joining up, like Ciara was saying, early intervention in psychosis and things like that, that all needs to be re-established and made transparent and works the way it does in other countries. It's just all over the place in Ireland, and with the lack of funding, it's only going to get worse. And that's my point.
Thanks, Roisin. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Say something about the further education. I came across a really good article about a disabled woman in the Irish Independent, and she actually changed the law. She was a really good advocate. I was really inspired by her. She got awarded a PhD scholarship, and the scholarship is only 16 grand a year, and they were going to take her medical card off her disability allowance, just all of her benefits, and there was no way that she could have done it. So she wrote an article in the Irish Times, and it was really powerful. And she got to a TDs, and she actually managed to change the law in that area. And I just thought, you know, it was just amazing what she did. So it just shows you what advocacy can do as well.
That's exactly the point. But I mean, I think coming back as well to everybody else's experience is, I think one of the issue, it's the issue in around mental health advocacy to some extent. It's not that it hasn't been there, because Cara's been talking about, you know, for the last 20 years or whatever. It's part of the issue is that the volume of it, a lot of it is still hidden. A lot of it is probably, it's the volume isn't as, in other words, that the volume of representations they're getting doesn't match the scale of the challenge and the scale of the problems out there. And so that is, I suppose, part of the thing, and I suppose why this training is being done, to try to encourage more people to get involved in advocacy, particularly on the ground. Because what we were saying last week is that the most important advocacy actually takes place in local constituencies. The national stuff, you know, is very much in support of that. And but you know, I gave an example last week. So Peter and Dominic and Ciara would have heard this, as well as Claire, that, you know, it was a lobbying campaign I was involved in, and one of the big supporters for this campaign was during the last government was Catherine Zappone. She was a really big supporter, but she actually her advisor came to us and said, look, nobody has come to her in her constituency clinic yet about this issue. And we need somebody to do that so she can go to her colleagues in government and say, look, I've had people come to me in my clinic about this, so something needs to be done about it. So that actually, so you know, we do need more persistence and a greater volume. But when I say a greater volume, you know, if we had sort of 5 or 6 people in each constituency, or even in critical constituencies, banging on about this all the time, it would make a massive, massive difference. A massive difference. So we're not talking about, and that's actually, if you multiply it, because there are 39 constituencies, a couple of hundred people, you know, spread around the country. Doesn't necessarily even have to be every constituency. As I said, it could even be half of them. Could be 100 people, you know, consistently, persistently advocating for improved mental health services, and just every couple of weeks at it again would make a massive difference. So I think that the phrase I would use is this, that there's no guarantee of success by, you know, our immediate success or whatever, but there's certainly an absolute guarantee that if there isn't a persistent, consistent campaign, then nothing is going to change. And I know, Cara, you've been persistent, and other people have as well. But we need more Caras around the place, not just you and your own. We need more of you spread around the country, because it's not just, and so even coming back to the organizations, I think it's important that I'll come back to just a minute, but like, we have a lot of organizations. Is it possible, for example, in the mental health space, so is it possible that they could coordinate at local level as well in terms of lobbying, so that we're not dissipating that energy? Is it possible that, you know, the sort of coordination that, say, mental health reform offers, say, at national level, could operate too, that we'd like little hit squads, so that the people coordinate together at local level, so that, you know, there's much greater bang for the buck, so to speak. But Cara, sorry, you were going to say.
There is, Pat, and the only way you can actually do that is through the forums. Now, because of it used to be the consumer panels, and we used to have very strong consumer panels, but when they decided to change it over to the forums, there was a different kind of, it was a HSC based run forum, where with the consumer panel, it was us running it and getting communication. Now, I think really what's after happening is the COVID has done it. Now, it has done an awful lot of damage to the local forums. I think the only way really, if we are going to get a good lobbying group, is to re-establish these forums, get a spokesperson from each of those forums to go to because they have their area leads and they go up nationally. But if you don't have a good forum, but then again, there's a lot of people won't go to these forums because they're sick and tired of listening to the same thing and nothing being done. So it's very hard to recruit people.
It is.
Very hard.
I understand that.
Yeah, and the only way you can actually do that, and I think a big way of doing this is doing a big national campaign around all of the forums through mental health reform, Mental Health Ireland, and mental health engagement. The 3 groups getting together and doing, you know, going around to the 3 different, you know, to go around to the different constituencies, but the 3 groups amalgamate together for one big campaign to actually get people to come out and talk. Now, they did try it. It didn't go anywhere, but I think now they have to do it because it's getting worse. The services have got worse. People are stressed out in the services. The staff are all stressed out in the services. I mean, I had a particular instance there recently. A family member rang me and her sister was suicidal, had attempted suicide 3 times. She was brought in for a 72-hour watch and sent home again because she presented well, because she knew how to play the game, right? She then went off the wall again and being totally paranoid. We called the guards, did everything that we could possibly do. We tried to get her in under under the involuntary, do you know what I mean? Well, we were told under Section 8, because she had a borderline personality disorder, she could not be sectioned under that. So then we tried for a Section 9. Do you know what I mean? But eventually she agreed to go in herself. But that's only one case. Do you know what I'm saying? And
that took huge energy and persistence to get.
And it is that, and I mean, this family had a language barrier as well, and they hadn't known the services, and it was very hard for them. But the thing about it is, what I'm saying is that it's very easy. I think really what's after happening as well in the mental health services, if somebody is in crisis, that person in crisis is not seen for 2 to 3 hours. The crisis has passed by then, so they will present very well.
Yeah.
They have to be seen within an hour of the crisis. If they're not seen within the hour of the crisis, they'll have calmed down. And if that is not persistent, right? But coming back to the story of how do we lobby, I think really what we have to do is we have to get the 3 mental health groups together to do a national campaign, locally, regionally, to get this up and running.
Thanks, Cara. And I think we're very much singing the same tune on that. Thanks for that. So what I want to do now is just ask people, go around the group and just get, I suppose, people's we did this the last day, but it's sort of, this is so the second thing, but just what are you going to take away from this? So maybe I'll start with Roisin. Any particular, so coming back to this morning, any particular new thought, new idea, or anything at all that you take from what we've done this morning?
Yes. First of all, obviously doing presentations in front of my classmates was terrifying. I can speak like this, but when you do it in front of your lecturer and your classmates, it can be really nerve-wracking. But like, there was several points there that I hadn't really considered before. Some you do naturally, and then some things I could go back over the notes if I was doing a presentation when I'm doing my master's and really get that down. Yeah, just that was really, really helpful. But also what was really nice was to see that everyone here is very passionate in their own way about what they want to get out of it. And when I first saw mental health reform pop up on social media, I was like, oh my God, there's people out there. There's actually people out there who care about this. So it was really nice to meet the people who showed up here today, because that just demonstrates how many people are so passionate about it. And I'm going to keep a closer eye on all the training and stuff that comes out of mental health reform, and obviously get involved where I can as well, and everything that you guys have said today, because my mother is always on to her local TD about this, that and the other, and she does get stuff done. So you're right. So I'm going to be more aware of that. But yeah, everything today about presenting and how to come across and stuff, and it was really nice to meet everyone here. I'm also one of those people who has a defective apartment, so I might contact you separately, Pat, about that.
Do rotate.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Ro.
It was great. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Carmen.
Hi, Pat. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I was quite blown away by everything today, because this is my first meeting. I missed last week, but I'm doing an honours in social care, and I've always been interested in advocacy, and I've been at home for since 2019, because I'm in the vulnerable group, where I'm on immunosuppressants, etc. But I thought the way that you showed about the presentation, I mean, I've practiced that in my what do you call it? I've practiced it. I can't even get the words out now because don't
worry.
I'm half nervous still. Anyway,
you're amongst friends.
Thank you. But I loved the way people were able to share their stories and their experiences, and I feel very privileged that to be allowed into, to listen to them.
Thank you, Carmen.
And I also feel that I'm not so much on my own as well with my own son. My son attempted to take his own life 3 years ago, and my other son is bipolar. So thank you very much anyway for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, Carmen. Thanks very much, and thank you for sharing too.
Thank
Fanula.
Sorry. I suppose the biggest thing I take from today, I'm extremely passionate about mental health, so I think if I was advocating, I might come across. It's got, I suppose your most important point was saying that to come across as if to make a good relationship with the person you're talking to, and not to come off, I suppose, overly aggressive, or just get your point across in a nice way. I think that'd be really important because it's something I want to get into professionally, advocacy. So yeah, and it was just really nice seeing everyone today, and again, just seeing everyone's passions, and it's nice seeing that there's a lot of energy out there for reform, and it's just brilliant. So it's really nice to come today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Fanula. Ciara, you were here the last day, so anything additional that sort of struck you from this morning?
Yeah, I suppose just for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm new to Shine, the organisation. So I just, as I said, wanted to immerse myself in the whole area of lobbying and better communications and so on. I suppose from an organisational point of view, historically, I think, like Mental Health Reform and Mental Health Ireland, we have one voice as an organisation that we tend to kind of put out there. But I'm going to try and, light the fire with some of our regional offices, and we've got several staff around the country nationwide who are really trying so hard to provide services under seriously difficult conditions. So it's about, I suppose, amplifying the volume and making sure that we can tackle our local constituents, regionally as well as nationally from the organisation. For myself, it's a great reminder this morning to make sure to bring the human element into the cause, and I love the reminder and the format of you're bringing the problem, you're bringing the solution.
Yeah.
And it's really just trying to bridge that. So lots of food for thought and great information. Thank you very much.
No problems. Peter.
Yeah, I was interested in everyone's story, and the whole thing has been a really good experience, and I was grateful to be part of it all. And we need reform, and
we do.
I never thought of badgering my TD before. Well, the only time you speak to them when they come around to the door and they're looking for a vote.
Yeah.
And you never see them again. That's what happens in Lucan, in the part of Lucan that I live in. But it's great, and people sharing the stories and the personal experience, and as I said before, I have bipolar, so I know what people go through. And I wish everyone luck in the future. So you never know, I might go down the road of advocacy myself. Thanks for everything.
Thanks. Pat. And thank you, Peter, very much as well. Thank you. Dominic.
I suppose, just thinking about it there while everyone else was talking, at one stage, Pat, I think you brought it from the particular back to the general. But when it comes to user stories, it becomes very particular. And I suppose, like at the very start of today's session, you were asking people to turn on their cameras, but I have, among other personality disorders, I have borderline personality disorder, or it's psychiatrists sometimes call it emotionally unstable personality disorder, which means your mood during the day, you can be in crisis or you can be in a massive high, or you sometimes don't get to dictate how you feel, and that's an active part, and you have coping mechanisms to try and level you out if you are in a bad state. But while you might always like to want to make a good impression or to meet people on time or to not appear nervous or anxious, that isn't always within your control. And
very good point.
If you're looking for somebody to be able to tell their story, sometimes the person that's going to be listening to you might not have the realization what you're actually going through. And I suppose to be able to communicate that at the start of a communication or an interview or any kind of a formal setting would be important. And as somebody who would have spoken and presented and performed in an advocacy role for many years before, in my life before mental illness, I would have been always very comfortable with that role, but things change and days change and hours change. So it's just, I suppose, to be able to give the person that's going to be listening to you the comfort that you set the expectations for them at the outset.
I think that's a super insight, Dominic. Thanks for sharing. I think it's a really, really good idea. Because actually I would suspect the vast majority of people you might be engaging with wouldn't have a clue. So I think at least I think that's a really, really, really good idea. So thanks very much, Dominic. I think it's a cracking idea. Thank you. Cara.
Where do you want me to start?
Oh no, hold on. We're finishing at 1 o'clock. So just all I'm looking for is just any learnings for you from this morning.
Well, from learning this morning, I'm delighted that there's new people coming into the groups. Do you know what I mean? It's fresh faces, it's fresh ideas. It's giving them the confidence to be able to do something themselves. Yeah. And I think that if they're as passionate as I am, I think, you know, we're to get a fair few people cracking out there. But again, that's what I learned about it. From the mediation side, I suppose, because I've been so used to doing it, it's been fabulous to actually refresh on it again.
Yeah.
That I found I had forgotten a few things in it. So that's just kind of put it back into perspective again for me. And I think really where I found that it is that people that, even though they're struggling to get forward within their lives, they're quite determined to do it. And I think that's a very, very refreshing thing to hear.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thanks, Cara. And thank you very much because you're bringing so much experience to bear in all this, which is brilliant to have. So really appreciate that, that you're sharing of that with us this morning. Claire, last but definitely not least.
Thanks, Pat. No, one of the things that I would take away from it was just you were saying there about the importance of being prepared. So one of the responses I got when I contacted the TDs was meet me in person, which was the last thing I was expecting. So after these kind of trainings, I feel a lot more prepared to do something like that. But I suppose because I work in the area of mental health and I would have, you know, personal experiences and family members in different pieces, I kind of thought that I could just go in and say what I was passionate about and try to remain professional. But having like this training and knowing that it's much more important to be prepared and know what you want to say and the points that you get across in that half an hour, like that's going to be hugely beneficial when I do go to meet those people.
Thanks, because the one bottom line is that they will all ask you is, so what do you want me to do? And if you don't know what you want them to do, then it's sort of going nowhere. And it is. And when they ask that, they're not asking you to give them a shopping list with 10 items on it. It's usually about 1, 2, or 3 things, no more than 3. Here are the things, and they will ask you that, because I know people, it happens, you know, come in with, you know, big sort of lists of things or whatever, and going to say, yeah, okay, what are your top 2 or 3 things? What are your priorities? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to push? And if you don't know before you go into the meeting what they are, then you're screwed. So you need to know. Yes, Cara, that's going to be shared with everybody. The presentation is going to go out to everybody. So after this, so look, that again comes back to the preparation, and so you know, my father was in the sales business for a long time, and he always he has this saying that you never put your hand on the door handle to leave before you get what you came into the room for in the first place. So you need to know what it is you're coming into the room for. What is the deliverable? What's the action? And it's not a cuddle or a sort of empathy. You're looking for them to do something. So this comes back to the solution. So you need to know what you want them to do before you leave the room, and they need to be clear on what it is you want them to do. And so when afterwards you come back to them and say, have you done it? And how are you getting on with that? Where is it at? And so it is about action. We're looking for change. So we need to know before we go into the room, before we have the meeting, this comes back to the prep, what it is we want them to do. What's the change we want? What do we want them to do? Because if we don't know, we'll get lots of tea and sympathy and bugger all else besides. Okay? And we've had enough of that. It's action we're looking for. Is that okay? So I think we're now at, yes, 1 o'clock, time to finish. So that's things. So thank you all so much for sharing. And thanks, Roisin, for the very nice applause. Appreciate that. And thank you for all the lovely feedback. And it's been great meeting with you, some of you last week and all of you today. And look forward to seeing you out there making plenty of noise, but more importantly, getting delivery on change, because that's what we're about. It's not noise for noise sake. It's about delivering results. Okay. Thanks, folks. And get out there.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, folks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
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 Bye.